Lewis, yesterday, after qualifying, you remained positive. Did you know your performance wasn't what it was yesterday? That you could show something better during the race? Yesterday, after the qualifying result, you maintained your positivity.
Yeah.
Did you know that your real potential was what you have shown today?
I think all weekend I've been really, really strong, and qualifying really didn't show the true pace. I think we had a few problems through qualifying, which meant that I was further back than I should have been. Anyways, went into today. Of course, none of us really knew what the true pace was going to be, but I felt great from the get-go, and was obviously closing the gap right at the end to Charles. A couple more laps that I think I would have had Charles, so maybe 1 or 2 more laps. So there's lots and lots of positives to take from it. We've got a lot of work to do to catch Mercedes, but it's not impossible. So really to a big gracias tutti to everyone back at the factory. I'm really, really proud of everybody for the work that we got, but we still got to keep pushing, keep digging deep. And I'm excited I'll keep pushing into the next race.
It's just a sunrise of this new era, new season.
It's a what?
Sunrise.
What do you mean sunrise?
When the sun
sunrise.
Yes, sunrise. Oh. Do you think that this gap with Mercedes is possible to close
I do.
Way?
That's what I said. Yeah, I do believe we can close the gap. I think it's not going to be easy. It's got a lot of work to do to close it because it's quite significant, particularly on a single lap. We need to find out whether it's power or it's battery power, but the car is just as quick through the corners, so we just got to keep pushing.
Can you imagine starting a new Formula One season thinking that you have finally put your worst year behind you, and realizing in the first race that your biggest rival could have an advantage you didn't even expect? Because that is exactly what Lewis Hamilton just experienced in Australia. After the Melbourne Grand Prix, the 7-time world champion left some statements that are generating a lot of noise within the paddock. He talked about a technical problem that ruined his classification. He admitted that 2025 was the worst year of his career, but above all he issued a warning that no one expected to hear so soon. Hamilton believes that Mercedes has a power advantage that could completely change the start of the championship. And the most surprising thing is that these words do not come from the frustration of a defeat, but from someone who claims to feel more motivated than ever with Ferrari. So the big question is inevitable. Are we facing the rebirth of Hamilton, or the first sign that Ferrari is once again starting the season one step behind? The 2026 Australian Grand Prix was much more than the first race of the season for Lewis Hamilton. In reality, it represented the true starting point of a new stage in his career, after 2025 that he himself described as one of the most difficult moments he has experienced in Formula One. During that year, the 7-time world champion went through a sporting and personal crisis that led him to question even his own level as a driver. There were no victories, there were no podiums, and what was even harder for someone with his experience, there were no feelings of control inside the car either. Hamilton admitted that there were times when he felt completely overwhelmed by the situation, to the point of telling himself that he was driving uselessly while watching Charles Leclerc become clearly more competitive during the race weekends. That stage left a deep mark on the Briton, but it also became the starting point of a transformation that he himself describes as a new beginning. Therefore, when the time came to start the 2026 season in Melbourne, Hamilton did not do so with the typical pressure of fighting for the championship from the first race, but with a different mentality: rebuild his confidence, consolidate his relationship with Ferrari, and demonstrate that the driver who dominated Formula One for more than a decade is still there. Over the winter, he and the team worked hard to improve internal communication, better understand the car's behavior, and create a much more fluid work environment than the one that existed the previous year. As Hamilton himself explained after the weekend in Australia, the environment within Ferrari now feels much more stable and positive. The conversations with the engineers are clearer, the car's development plan is better defined, and the preseason tests allowed us to accumulate enough information to start the championship with a solid base of work. However, the first real contact with the competition made it clear that the challenge ahead is enormous. In the early stages of qualifying at Albert Park, Hamilton became reasonably comfortable with the Ferrari's performance. In fact, he himself explained that during Q1 the car seemed competitive and that the times indicated that it could be fighting in positions close to 3rd or 4th place. The car responded well with the medium tires, and the sensations inside the cockpit were positive, something that contrasted with many of the difficulties it had had the previous year. At that moment it seemed that Ferrari had taken a step forward and that Hamilton could start the season within the leading group. But that feeling didn't last long. In the next phase of qualifying, everything changed suddenly. Hamilton explained that the car began to suffer a problem related to the energy deployment of the hybrid system, a key element in modern Formula One because it determines the additional power that the driver can use on the straights and in the acceleration phases. This loss of performance directly affected his fastest lap, made him lose pace in key sectors of the circuit and left him out of the fight for the first positions on the grid. He ultimately ended up qualifying in 7th position, a result that he said did not represent the true potential of the Ferrari that weekend. Hamilton even stated that, without that technical problem, the car had enough pace to fight for positions between 3rd and 4th on the grid. But beyond that specific failure, what really caught attention in his statements was the comparison he made with Mercedes. Throughout the weekend, Hamilton observed something that deeply surprised him: the speed shown by the German team's cars. As he explained, the difference was not limited to a single point on the circuit or a specific circumstance of the session, but seemed to be present in practically all sectors of the track. That consistency in performance led the Brit to a worrying conclusion: the Mercedes engine could be offering a significant power advantage over the rest of the field. Hamilton went even further in trying to quantify that difference. In his own words, the deficit he perceived could be around 0.2 of a second or even more due to power alone. For a driver with his experience in telemetry analysis and car behavior, a statement of this type is not something minor. It means that, from their point of view, the gap is not solely due to poor Ferrari setup or a specific aerodynamics issue, but that there could be a structural advantage within Mercedes' technical package. And if that advantage is confirmed throughout the first races, Ferrari will have to react quickly if it does not want to be left out of the fight for the championship too soon. That is precisely the great dilemma that begins to be defined after the first race of the year. On the one hand, Hamilton insists that he feels mentally stronger than at any time last year and that his relationship with Ferrari is entering a much stronger stage. But on the other hand, the competitive reality that he found in Australia reminds him that Formula One does not forgive technical delays. And if Mercedes has indeed found a performance advantage at the start of the season, then Ferrari will not only have to improve its car, it will have to do it quickly to prevent the championship from starting to slip away from the first races. The problem for Lewis Hamilton did not end when he analyzed the technical failure that affected his classification in Australia. Indeed, as the post-weekend interviews progressed, a much bigger concern began to emerge within his speech: the sense that Mercedes has started the 2026 season with a technical advantage that could set the pace of the championship from the start. And the most disturbing thing for Ferrari is that this perception does not come from external rumors or journalist analysis, but from Hamilton himself, one of the drivers with the greatest ability to interpret what happens inside and outside the car. During his statements, the Briton explained that what he observed on the track really surprised him. It was not just about the Mercedes being fast on a specific lap or in a specific sector of the circuit, something that can happen due to specific settings or conditions. What Hamilton perceived was a constant superiority throughout the entire lap, something that for a driver of his experience is usually a clear sign of a significant mechanical advantage. When he compared the telemetries and the behavior of the cars on track, the conclusion that began to form in his head was that Mercedes could have a significant advantage in terms of engine power. Hamilton even dared to put numbers to that difference, something unusual in public statements. As he explained, the advantage could be around 0.2 of a second or even more in terms of power alone. In a sport where differences are often measured in thousandths, 0.2 represents a huge margin, especially if it is maintained consistently throughout the entire lap. And if that advantage really comes from the power unit, the problem for Ferrari becomes much more complex, because it is not simply a matter of improving the balance of the car or introducing an aerodynamic update, but of competing against a technical package that could be performing at a higher level from the start of the season. These types of comments take on even more weight when Hamilton's history with Mercedes is taken into account. For more than a decade he was the leader of the German team and knows deeply how its technical structure works, how its engines evolve and how they usually manage the first phases of a season. Therefore, when he himself expresses surprise at the performance he has seen in Australia, his words are not simply interpreted as frustration after a bad result, but as a technical reading based on years of experience analyzing data, telemetry and behavior of cars on the track. But the real problem for Ferrari is not only the possible advantage of Mercedes, but the moment in which it appears. Hamilton made it clear that the first races of the season can be decisive for the development of the championship. If a team manages to open a significant gap in the first 7 races, recovering that gap later becomes extremely difficult for even the most competitive teams. In modern Formula One, the calendar and development limitations mean that each update has to be precisely calculated, and losing too much ground at the start can mean being left out of the fight before the big evolutions of the car arrive. Therefore, behind Hamilton's apparently calm words you can perceive a mix of motivation and concern. On the one hand, he insists that mentally he feels much stronger than in 2025 and that the relationship with Ferrari is entering a much more positive phase. But at the same time, his technical analysis of the weekend in Australia reveals that the path to the title could be more complicated than many imagined before starting the season. Because if Mercedes has really found an advantage in its power unit, Ferrari will not only have to improve its car, it will have to do it quickly to prevent the history of the 2026 championship from starting to be written too soon. The 2026 Australian Grand Prix made something very clear for Lewis Hamilton. The real challenge of this season will not only be to recover his best version as a driver, but to ensure that Ferrari has the technical capacity to respond to what appears to be an extremely competitive start to the championship. After everything he experienced in 2025, Hamilton came into this new campaign with a completely different mentality, convinced that he had left behind the worst moment of his career and prepared to show that he can still fight at the top of Formula One. However, the reality he found in Melbourne was a mix of positive signs and warnings that cannot be ignored. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.